called factor by grouping. Same thing that we have been doing. We're going to use the distributed property factor. Okay? But the first thing, when you have four terms like this, so 1, 2, 3, 4, there are four terms. I want you to draw a line right down the middle of them. We're going to split them up. Okay? And you can go ahead and put parentheses around the first two, and then go ahead and put parentheses around that second two. Now, anytime you have four terms like this, I want you to factor by grouping. So, I want you to look at those first two terms. Okay? Rn and 5n. What's going to be the greatest common factor of these two numbers? Just those two. Dylan Ryder is right. The greatest common factor is just going to be n. Okay? That's the only factor they have in common. Now, if I factor that out, what am I going to have left? Well, I'm going to have an r. And I'm going to have plus 5. Just like we have been doing. Exactly like we have been doing. Find the greatest common factor of two terms right there. That's all you're doing. Write down what's left inside the parentheses. Now, we're going to do the same exact thing for those negative r and that negative 5. Now, remember when I said anytime you're factoring like this, always take the sign of the first term. If that's a negative r, what's my greatest common factor? Negative 1, David. You're close. First of all, r and 5, there is no common factors between them, except for 1. They are both negative, so I can factor out a negative 1. That's essentially the greatest common factor. Like if you came over to the side and you factored out negative r, really that's just negative 1 times r. If you factored out negative 5, that's just negative 1 times 5. So if you need to do that, that's perfectly fine. And you can see that the greatest common factor is the negative 1 there. Okay, so that's really the greatest common factor is a negative 1. Now we're going to do the exact same. We're going to do exactly what we did before. Since we factored out a negative 1, we're going to write down what we have left. So for r, I have r. For that negative 5, all I have left since I factored out a negative 1 is just 5. Okay? We're done with the hard part. Now we're down to the easy part. Because we have two of those r plus 5s. Okay? This is why they call this grouping. Because we have two of those, I want you to think of it as we can just write down one of those. Okay? Since we have two of those, we can just write down one of those. We're not solving, we're just factoring. Now, this n is going to come down to here. And this negative 1, because it's outside the parentheses, is going to drop down right here.
Wouldn't the negative 1 go first instead of n?
No, and now it's just going to be n. Since that's a minus 1, I'm just write down minus 1. And that's your answer. This is called factor by grouping. Now I want you to think about this. I like to think if you have an r, like if you have since you have two of these r plus 5s, you can think of it as a 2-for-1 special. Since you have two of these, exactly the same thing, you're just going to write down 1. And then anything outside of the parentheses, you're going to write down right here. You're just going to put those together. Okay? Now, the other side to this is we're still using distributive property because if I multiplied n, you remember, how would I multiply these two terms? I could use FOIL, but what else could I use? I could distribute them, right? I could multiply n times r plus 5 and then negative 1 times r plus 5. Really, just written like that, just what we just did. You guys see that connection also? So this is all distributive property right here. The concept about grouping is from going r plus 5 and the r plus 5, group those together, and then group together what's outside the parentheses n minus n, and then a minus 1. So your answer is this bottom part right there. Simple, right? Good. We're going to draw our line down the middle. We're going to split it up into two terms and two terms. Okay. Oh, you're not even seeing that. Now, I'm going to find the greatest common factor of the 3BC. So 3 times B times C. Then I'm also going to find the greatest common factor of a negative 2B. So negative 1, 2 times B. Okay. So my only greatest common factor is just going to be just the B. Okay. Now what's going to be left? Well, from my 3BC, all I have left is 3C. From my negative 2B, all I have left is a negative 2. Now let's go over to the other side and factor out these. Now, remember what I said, always, when you're factoring like this, always factor out the first sign. If that's a negative 10, that is what I want to factor out. Okay? No, we can leave it the same. I don't want you to do that. From those two numbers is going to be 5. Now, what's going to be left inside of my parentheses? Well, I have a negative 1 and a 2, so that's going to be a negative 2. I also have a 3 and a C, so that's going to be plus 3C. Now, why does this look a little bit different? Because the negative 2 and the 3C are just flipped. Well, what's these? What do you need to do? Flip them. Just flip them in order. Just keep the sign, so positive 3C and a minus 2 times 5. And on this left side, I got B times a 3C minus 2. Okay? Now, I have a 3C minus 2 in both of my parentheses. That's the 2 for 1 special. If you got 2 of those, you can just write down one of those. And I'm going to group together my terms that are outside of the parentheses. Becomes a B plus 5. Okay?